Hello friends, good evening. Welcome to PDF for Exams YouTube channel. This is day 31 and we are starting a new subject, environment and ecology. Till now we have completed polity and geography. This subject is also very important for you UPSC as many questions arises from this section. So you have to understand each and every concept from this subject very carefully. Okay. So this video will be a first video and a kind of introductory. So let's see what concepts we are going to learn in this subject or in this video. So in this video, we will be learning about environment, ecology and ecosystem. Starting with environment. What do you understand by environment? If you haven't studied the subject or if we talk about the general perception of environment, everyone would say environment means nature. That means everything present in and around nature will be called as environment. Or some people consider agricultural and pastoral activities like animal herding and all. These are also considered under environment as crops, plants and all are part of nature. That's why they too are considered as environment. But if we study environment systematically according to subject environment and ecology, then it has got some specific definition. And if we see the general definition, that means the simple term in literal meaning of environment means surrounding. So the simplest definition or the meaning of environment would be surrounding. So if we take a reference point to study anything or any concept in science or any subject, we take a reference point so that we understand the definition. So in this case, we can take a reference point or any individual. So any individual like you, me or anyone can be reference point, or else any biotic or abiotic components. What are biotic components? So biotic components are all the living components. That means the things which are living in nature, they are called as biotic component. And opposite of this abiotic components, the components which are non-living in nature. Fine. So any of these, for example, if we are considering an individual as a reference point, so everything, anything and everything around you would be called as environment, your environment. Fine. So we are considering this individual as a reference point and we are seeing what are things around him or her. So if you are the base point or reference point, what you can see around you? You can see your home, you can see roads, railways, schools, shops, other people's, animals, birds, trees. So many things can be seen around you. So everything that surrounds you would be called as environment. Now, as we know, these component of environment never lies in isolation. That means they can never seen in isolation. They can't stay alone. For example, if you are staying in isolation, you will be staying somewhere. For example, you might be staying in a home, in a room, or you might go somewhere out in woods, but there would be something or the other surrounding you. So it can't be ever in isolation. Any object of environment can't be in isolation. So if they're not in isolation and they are with someone else, there would be some kind of interaction. So by seeing this character, you can derive the definition of environment. Let's see how environment is defined. So the term environment is defined as sum total of living. That means whatever living objects are there, living. Sum total means you can add up non-living things, influences and events surrounding an organism. So over here, an organism is considered as a reference or base point, and every non-living, living components, influences, that means relations, interrelations, events surrounding that organization would be termed as environment. Okay, so we just saw the definition of environment according to the characteristic what we studied. So again, everything that surrounds or affects the organism during its lifetime is collectively known as environment. So you might heard at your home that your child's environment is not good. For example, if you're learning in an English medium school and you're not able to speak English, so what you're generally told that you should get an environment where people speak English. That means, and you should be surrounded by people who are speaking English, then only you can understand the language. So it's simply the surrounding is known as environment. I hope you have understood the definition of environment now. So moving further, let us see what else it is there. So looking by the components of environment, what are the components? So environment consists of two major parts. One is abiotic components and other is biotic components. Abiotic we have already discussed, means the non-living components like soil. Topography means the surface structure of the land surface, water, atmosphere. These are understood. So these are the abiotic component part of environment. What are the biotic components? Biotic components mean the living organisms. So what are living organisms? All green plant, non-green plant. See, all plants are not green. Green means that plant consists of chlorophyll and do photosynthesis to produce their food. Whereas some plants are non-green in nature. Plants are non-green and they consume food in some other matter. That means they don't produce their own food, but still they are called plant. Apart from them, there are animals, parasites, decomposers. So these two are biotic components of environment. Okay. And again, one very important part of environment is that environment is not static. That means the component, whatever are there, may it be abiotic or biotic component, there would be always interaction between these components. The flux keep on changing. That means it is not static. So these are few very important point of environment. I hope now environment is clear. Now moving to next important term, that is biosphere. Now what is this biosphere? You already have heard about this biosphere. If you haven't, don't worry, I will be telling you. So biosphere is this place where all kind of life exists. Okay, so you can see over here, biosphere is a life supporting layer. So you can term biosphere as a life supporting layer which surrounds the earth and makes existing of all life possible without any protective layer. What do you mean by protective layer? So for example, if you're living in a house, then the walls and roof of your house is your protecting layer. Whereas biosphere, in biosphere we don't have any limitation. There is no certain protective layer for living, but there is everything naturally present. So if we want to know the biosphere, actually what it mean by biosphere, so it is the combination of three layers. We have hydrosphere. You know what do you mean by hydrosphere? Hydrosphere means the water body. Atmosphere, we have studied the atmosphere in geography in very detail, so you know very well about atmosphere. These are the gases which are present in air. Okay, and apart from this there is lithosphere. Lithosphere means the land part. So wherever there would be combination of these three, life will be in existence. So you can take any example. If you can take example of where we are living. If you are living in your house, you can see there is a surface on which your house is built. Okay, there is air which you breathe above the earth's surface. There is air all around, that is atmosphere in which you breathe. And of course water is very necessary element for your survival, the water which you use for drinking and which you use for cooking your food. So these components are very important, and wherever these components meet, life exists. In case of your example, we have seen in case of aquatic life also, we can see there is a water body, there is a base on which the water is there, and of course the atmosphere from which oxygen is extracted for the aquatic animal to breathe in. Fine. So we have understood what is a biosphere. And what are the components? Let's see what are the components of biosphere. So the important components of biosphere are the biotic and organic component. Again, these will be same as it was in case of environment. Biotic means the living organisms like microorganisms, plants and animals, including humans also. Fine. Next is inorganic components. So inorganic or abiotic components would be the components like soil, water, air, temperature and sunlight. So these would be part of biosphere. So it is very clear, if you understand these three layers, atmosphere, hydrosphere and living organism together, sorry, lithosphere I've excluded. So when you consider these points together, you'll extract these components. Again, energy components, so again the solar and geothermal energy would be part of biosphere. Okay, and biosphere is termed as open system also. Why open system? What do you mean by open system and closed system? Open system means where the movement or interaction continually happens, whereas closed system means whereas interaction or flow of energy or transfer of energy cannot take place once it is done or once equilibrium has been attained. But in open system, it continuously exchanges the energy or interrelationship between the two bodies. Fine. So this is all about the biosphere. Let's see if anything is remaining. Yes, one more point is remaining in biosphere. What is that? The modifiers. What are modifiers? What do you mean by modifiers? Modifiers is derived from the term modification. Modification means changing. So if there is any alteration in biosphere, there would be several factors. So what are those factors? Those factors are physical modifier, chemical modifier and biological modifiers. If we see them in detail, the physical modifier, first you should know what are the physical components. So physical component available in biosphere would be like air, quality and airflow, and how these are affected. Any pollution can be there in air, and every kind of pollutant which can be present in air ultimately affects the biosphere, because these pollutants disable all the organism to survive in the natural existence or habitat. Next is chemical modifier. Now there are many chemicals composition of air, water and soil. So chemical like whatever the pollutants are present in chemical form in air, they can also affect the biosphere. Next is biological modification. So what will the biological modification? Generally you have seen the cropping pattern, population pressure, manipulation of species density on the distribution. So naturally, see for example, naturally what happens, we can grow a particular crop in particular area, but with use of pesticides, fertilizer, people tend to grow other kind of crop of those areas. Though again, the biosphere of that region would be affected. Fine. So this is all about biosphere. I hope you have understood biosphere. Moving to next term, that is ecology. Now what is this ecology? So we have understood environment, we have understood biosphere. Ecology means the interrelationship among the organization and interaction between organism and environment. So we have understood what is environment. Environment is everything surrounding an organism is called environment. So as I said, all the components of environment or the organism, that means any individual or any animal, any plant, can't exist in isolation. And if they are not in isolation, there would be some kind of interaction or interrelationship between components of environment. So because of that, the study of this interrelationship or interaction between organism and environment will be called as ecology. Fine. And this ecology is derived from the Greek word called oikos, which means home, and logos mean to study. So simply we can understand this: ecology means study of habitat of people. That means we don't study the relationship of the organism anywhere or everywhere. There should be a particular place where they are staying. So habitat is a place of an organism where they live, and we study these interaction and interrelationship among the organism in their own habitat. Then only it will be called as ecology. Okay, I hope this is clear. Now moving further, we'll see what is ecology. So ecology has several types. They are divided into specially two parts, and after that they may be classified in subparts. So the first type is autochology and the second part is synecology. Autochology means the interaction or interrelationship between the species, the same species. That means, what do you understand by species? It should be very clear to you. Species, what do you mean by species? So species in science or scientific term means the species which can reproduce and produce fertile offspring. What do you mean by fertile offspring? That means the offspring which are produced, they too can further produce their offspring. So if any organism or any animal would be called in a certain species if they have capacity to reproduce and produce a fertile offspring. Fine. So there are several species, like we human belong to Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens are human species, so we have capacity to reproduce and produce fertile offspring. Similar, there are many mammals, birds. So there are several species which are present. So the autochology means interaction of same species among themselves. Okay, among them, not among themselves exactly, among themselves, among their environment. So if there is a certain species, how it interacts with the environment is studied under autochology. Next is synecology. So synecology means the study of interaction between the composition, organization and development of communities and the environment. See, over here there was a single species. In case of synecology, it would be multiple species, a community. In community, you know, several kind of people live. So similarly, in case of species also, there would be several communities interacting with the environment, and that is studied under synecology. Now synecology is further divided into many segments. Let's see them one by one. So we'll see the name, and by the name itself it will be clear, but still we'll see the definitions. So now population ecology. What do you mean by population? First of all, what do you mean by population? Population means the number of species. The number grows in certain area, that is called population. That means the number increasing of any kind of species, and we add some of them, that entirely would be called as population. So by population ecology, it means the interaction between individual populations. For example, there would be one species, so the species interacting among themselves would be called as population ecology. Don't get confused over here. Over here we saw that in case of autochology, there was interaction between species and the environment. But here what we are seeing, there is interaction between individual population among with each other. They are interacting with each other, not with the environment. So that kind of studies is done under population ecology. Next is community ecology. So here the relationship would be with different species of plants, like different plethora of plant or individuals will interact with themselves and environment. That would be called as community ecology. Biome ecology, over here more than one biological community is interacting. That means a complete community is there. For example, several species, one species community is this, there's this another species community, and there's another third species community. When they interact with each other, that would be studied in the biological community. And last we have ecosystem ecology. Ecosystem ecology means when two ecosystems are interacting with each other. What is ecosystem? We'll study further, but for now you just understand there is something you call ecosystem, and when this ecosystem is interacting with each other, that would be studied under ecosystem ecology. Okay, fine. And there are certain more ecology. What are they? Let's see. Habitat ecology. What is habitat ecology? Habitat means the place of living. So when the relationship or the interrelation is studied in their habitat, would be called as habitat ecology. Next is applied ecology. So there is a specialized field of ecology under which conservation of economic exploitation of organism is studied. For what do you mean by economic exploitation of this organism? So for example, there's agriculture practices are done. In agriculture practices, several crops are grown, and these crops are exploited in order to get some economic benefit. So that is studied under applied ecology. Next is system ecology. System, again by the name itself it is clear, that means interpretation of ecological concept and process in terms of mathematical models and formula. That means the mathematical models and formula would be used for understanding any kind of ecology or interaction between some species. Genealogy means the genetics, wherever the genetic composition would be involved, that would be called as genealogy. Social ecology, if you have understood or learned about social justice, society, then you know what is society and sociology. So the interaction in society with each other would be studied under social ecology. So we are done with the ecology and types of ecology. Also we see the next term, that is ecosystem. So ecosystem is also very important term which you should know. So let's see what is the definition of ecosystem, and after that we'll understand what exactly it is. So an ecosystem is defined as structural and functional unit of biosphere. What is biosphere? It is clear, wherever the lithosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere and living organism meet is called a lithosphere. But when they are structurally and functional unit, that means structural functional. What do you mean by structural function? So as we can see, there are several structures, there are individual structures, and they too have some function. This structure would have its own function, the other hydrosphere would have its own function, atmosphere would have its own function, and organism would have its own function. So when the structure and function meets together, then it is called structural and functional unit. So this entirely makes a structural functional unit of biosphere. This will be called as ecosystem. Fine. So we'll try to understand this by image. You will understand better what it means. So I hope this is clear. If it is not clear, just let me zoom it out so that the image becomes more clear. Okay, just a minute, give me a little time. Okay, so image is zoomed now, and we have to see what is there. So here we can see at top level there is an individual or one single living organism, and with when this individual multiplies or of same species different individual exists, that would be called as population, which I've already told. And again when several species, that means from several places if people come along and some different species are also present, that would be called as community. Now there would be interaction among these several species in the community, and that in all along with the environment would be called as ecosystem. So here is written all the living and non-living things that interact with each other in given area. So the area would be fixed. For example, if you are living in your home and you have your family, in your family there are your parents, your siblings, and there might be some kids in your house. So when you all interact with each other in your house, so your house would be a kind of ecosystem for you all. Fine. Similarly, if there is a pond or there is a ocean, any body, within that pond all the living species, what are living species in a pond? There may be frogs, there may be fish, there may be some plants, submerged plants and plants which move out of the surface of water. So when all these living organisms interact with each other, and even there are some abiotic components like the temperature, pressure. So when these all components interact with each other, they would be termed as ecosystem. Fine. And so as per this, there are several ecosystems present, like aquatic ecosystem, land ecosystem. So several ecosystems are present just as per this. Fine. So I hope the definition of ecosystem is clear. Now we will see the components of ecosystem. So let's see in the image what components are given, and after that we'll see them individually, what do they mean. So any ecosystem consists of two components. Those are abiotic components and biotic components. See, we have seen the same case in case of environment. But environment, what was difference in environment and ecosystem? In environment there was no fixed area given. That means everything and anything around an organism would call an environment. But in case of ecosystem, there is a specific area allotted. Apart from that, most of the components are same, as it was abiotic and biotic components. So we have biotic and abiotic component under ecosystem also. So under abiotic components, it is divided into climate and edaphic. Climate we know very well: rain, light, wind, temperature. These comes under climate. We have studied this in geography. So you must be aware how they affect the environment, or how do these affect the crops, animal, plants, and all the effects we have already seen. Next is edaphic. So soil, pH, mineral, topography, these all the adaptic factors. As we know, there are several kinds of soil present everywhere on the earth, and different plants grow on different kind of soil. Minerals, we have also studied about the minerals in economic geography or human geography. And topography means the somewhere there is mountain region, somewhere there is plain, somewhere there is plateau. So this also affects the existence of plants and animals. So these factors are very important. Next is biotic components. So these biotic components are majorly divided into producers, and they are called as autotrophs, consumers or heterotrophs, and finally they are divided into decomposers or saprotroph. This consumer or heterotrophs are subdivided into primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, or quaternary consumer. We'll say them in detail, don't worry about them. So we'll start with abiotic component and see them in detail, what are these components and how does this affect. So abiotic components, so we know very well what are abiotic components. Abiotic components are the non-living chemical and physical factor in an ecosystem. We have seen what is ecosystem. So all the non-living components are chemical and physical factors in an ecosystem would be called as abiotic components. Now what are the physical factors? So physical factors are very simple: light, temperature, water, atmospheric gases. These are the physical factors. As we can see them, we can't see gases, but at least we know that atmosphere is present, and by some chemical method we can see the atmospheric gases also. Water we know very well, temperature and light. So these are the physical factor which affects the ecosystem or interaction in the ecosystem. How do that affect? For example, if we consider light, so light is very important for plants and even for humans also. How they are important? See, we as human, we depend on oxygen. Oxygen is very important gas for us to breathe, or else we won't exist. Even for animals also, oxygen is very important. But in case of plant don't use oxygen for production of their food. Instead they use carbon dioxide, which is excreted by humans and plants. So what is the process? We know this process also, you might have studied under biology in your junior classes. Photosynthesis, if you've heard the name of photosynthesis, then you know this very well how it works. So what happens in photosynthesis? Plants consist of chlorophyll. I'm not going in very detail because these would be covered under science, but still I'm just giving you a brief idea. So there is a chlorophyll green element along with sunlight, and some other components are also there. It produces oxygen and glucose. Glucose is termed as food of the plant, whereas this oxygen, the gas, and and carbon dioxide gas is also very important for production of food, and this oxygen is very important for all kind of humans and animals existing on this planet to live. So we can see how light can affect our life. Next is temperature. So as there are several climatic conditions on different part of the earth, somewhere it is very cold, somewhere it is very hot, and somewhere it is very moderate. So depending on temperature, different kind of species and plant exist from one place to other. For example, there are some plants which can only grow in extreme cold weather, and there are some plants which can grow in dry weather, like cactus. Cactus can be even found in desert area where temperature is very high, and there are some other parts even in very cold temperature, like in Russia the temperature is very cold, even in Jammu and Kashmir. So wherever the area is very cold, there also few specific kind of plants and trees are found. Fine. And water, we don't need to explain about water, how it is important for us for our sustainability. And atmospheric gases, again this is also very important, because in atmosphere only we have oxygen, carbon dioxide, ozone is also very important gas. Ozone is just formed by adding 3 molecules of oxygen, but still it is very important gas for us. How we know this very well? If you have studied or listened the chapter of geography in climatology, we have seen why ozone is important. Ozone is important because it consumes all the ultraviolet rays coming from the sun, which affects, if it comes directly on the earth's surface without getting absorbed, it will affect our skin. We might suffer with all kind of skin cancer and all. So this ozone gas is very important. How oxygen is important, we know this very well. Carbon dioxide, how it is important, we know this. And the major composition of atmosphere is nitrogen gas. This nitrogen gas is important or consumed by plants with the process of nitrification for preparing their food or for their growth. Fine. So atmosphere is also very important. Moving further, let's see what is there. And there is some organic compounds and inorganic compounds. What are organic compounds? So organic compounds are the fundamental building block of living system. So what are fundamental building block of a system? Although it is called cell, but in cell we have protein. Where are they? We have proteins, lipids, carbohydrates. So these are the components which are important for building blocks of our living system, whether it is cell, tissue, or whatever. Next is inorganic components. So what are inorganic components? So components such as carbon dioxide. See, carbon is a gas, carbon dioxide is a gas, but they are even formed in solid form also, like graphite, diamond. There are many substances which in which carbon content is very much. That's why carbon is very important for existence. We have sulfur nitrates, phosphates, iron. So these are salts which are very important for survival of any living body on the earth's surface. Okay, so we are done with abiotic components. Now moving to the biotic components, we have been studying since the beginning. Biotic components means the living organism present on the earth's surface are called biotic components. So as we have seen in the diagram that they were classified in 3 classes. What were the 3 classes? Those were the producers. Now by the name, if you understand, producers means the species which are able to produce their own food, and they are termed as autotrophs. Now which species are able to produce their own food? By using natural availability of all the components. So plants are the basic organisms, so you can say plants are the only which can produce their own food by consuming carbon dioxide, sunlight and chlorophyll which they have, and they produce their own food. We as human, we depend on these plants. Sometimes see there are several carnivorous and herbivorous. You know this very well, what kind of species are there. So we human are plant eaters. There are few animals which are plant eater, and humans are also carnivores. Carnivores means animals eater. So ultimately, so we are anyhow or some way dependent on these producers. Fine. And what is the next level? Next layer is consumer, or next type of biotic component is consumer, or called as heterotrophs. So heterotrophs can consume and synthesize the food which are prepared by autotrophs, or autotrophs itself are consumed by consumers. So what examples? Herbivorous. Herbivorous means the animals which depend upon all kind of grasses and herbs like cow, deer, rabbit. These are herbivorous animals. And there are few carnivorous animals which eat animals. Which animals? Like lion, cat and dog. These eats other animal. Now see how they are dependent on these autotrophs. As these cow, deer and rabbit, they consume autotrophs, and at the end lion, cat and dog, they consume these animals. So ultimately these are somehow dependent on autotroph. If the autotroph would not be present, these animals won't be able to exist, and if they don't exist, these animals can't eat or exist. Fine. So each level is dependent on some one other. We'll see later how and why they are dependent. Just now let's classify and see the components of biotics. Next layer is decomposers. So what are decomposers? So decomposers are called fungi or bacteria. So these are very small in size. They are microscopic animals. We can't see them under, not animals, organism. We can't see them under naked eye. We need microscope to see them. So what is their function? What they do whenever any plant or animal die, so these microorganisms feed over those dead plants and animals and produce important nutrients for plants. Plants, what are plants? Plants are autotrophs, and plants, in using those nutrients and whatever things are produced, they further grow, and again the cycle continues. So it is a cyclic formula. We can see how it is interrelated to each other. Okay, so I hope this is also very much clear. Now moving to another topic which is called as ecologic succession. What is this ecologic succession? What do you mean by under term succession? Succession means follower or following, if followed by something. Okay, so ecology, we have understood the ecology also. That means a study of interaction or interrelationship of organism with its environment in a particular area is called ecological or ecology. So in ecology succession, we just need to understand the evolution of any organism or any species in particular area where it wasn't present. So there are certain types of ecological succession, but before that we have to understand what it is or how it happens. So see, there are initially when there was nothing on this planet, somehow the organism or life form existed or came into existence on a surface of earth. So what happens, see, if you take we'll just take an example and then we'll try to understand what mean by ecological succession, then we'll understand better. So for example, there is a rock. Okay, so initial period rocks were formed when volcanic eruptions were there. So there was initially some rock, and on this rock somehow one lichens are the microorganism or fungi, you can say. These started producing, these started generating, and when they fed on these rocks, what they did, they secreted some kind of chemical, and due to secreting of this chemical and some physical features, what are they? Like temperature and pressure. Because of these rocks started breaking. Okay, these rocks started breaking, and due to this process it converted into soil. What are soil? Soil are nothing but very fine particles of these rocks only. Ultimately these rocks are converted to soil. Now when it is converted to soil, see, and it is not taking place in one day or 1 year. Thousands of years are included. Thousands of years are involved in converting a rock into soil. Okay, so once this was converted into soil, another kind of species grew up. So For example, somewhere or the other, if plants were there and plants grow with the help of seeds, so those seeds can be brought up to this place by external means. What are those external means? They can be air, animals. So those can be any means by which those seeds of those plants or things can be brought over here. Now those seeds grow over here, and once they grow, they move further. At initial period, some small grasses and herbs grow, then some shrubs grow, and later on a tree grows, and these trees last to very long. And what are the important concept over here? So the initial organism or initial species which grew over here, it has got the least lifespan, and the one which grows at last, for example the trees, after this small grass the tree grew up, it has the longest life cycle. Okay, and what we call the initial period or the first species which came into existence after the formation of soil are called as pioneer, fine. And the last one which came is called as climax, or you can say climax community. So this is called as pioneer community, which comes at beginning, and which comes at last is called climax community. By name itself, you go to watch movie and you always discuss what a great climax it was. So climax means end. So the last species would be called as climax community. Fine. So I hope the process is very much clear to you what we mean by this. Let's take an example by image over here to see. So as what I've told, there was a rock and something, the lichens and mosses came there, they secreted some chemical, rocks were broken, few grass and herbs grew, after that a few plants grew, and after that finally tree grew. And the first organism or first species was called as pioneer community, and the next last community was called as climax community. So this is very much clear to you. Now we will see the types of succession. What are they? So there are certain types, we'll see them one by one. The first is autogenic and allogenic. So what means by autogenic? Auto means automatically, or which is happening itself. So the succession, when succession is brought by living inhabitant of the community, is called autogenic succession. So for example, we saw example of plant. So in case of this, if any plant brings the seeds of its inhabitant or its community to the certain place where it has grown to a tree, then it will be called as autogenic succession. And when it happens by external forces like pressure, temperature, air, whatever the external sources might be, then it will be called as allogenic succession. Fine. Next is induced succession. So induced means whenever there is third party involved in succession or growth of this segment or these growth of any species or organism. So we can take of example of agriculture. In agriculture, what happened, there was a land, people used to come here, they plowed the land, they sow seed, and they use even some kind of a pesticide, insecticide for growth of those plants. So that will be called as induced succession. Okay. Next is defective succession. So it's not necessary that all succession would be very much clear and they will follow a same path. Sometimes what happens, it doesn't follow the same path. For example, initially few small grasses came, then small plants came, then herbs came, then tree came. So what could happen, after these small grasses, directly a tree could grow, and after that shrubs and herbs grow. So when this order changes, that is termed as defective succession. Okay. Next is primary succession, so and secondary succession. So these are important succession, and there is a single difference between these two succession. In primary succession, what happens, everything is started from beginning. For example, I said the formation of soil start with the rocks. So in primary succession, the process will start from this phase, whereas in secondary succession, the soil would be already made on which the plants will grow. So see, this is just an example. We are considering example of plants. There could be example of a pond also, aquatic life also. There can be any example. Since we have taken example of agriculture, that's why I'm considering over here that's rocks were formed. If you take example of aquatic life, so what will be the primary phase? Primary phase of aquatic life would be that water body is formed. But in case of secondary succession, water body would be already present. Fine. I hope you're understanding the point. If you don't get it, just write in comment box. I will explain again in next video. I'll make a separate video on this because this is very important concept which you need to know. Okay, so primary and secondary succession are over, and I hope you have understood. Next is autotrophic and heterotrophic. So this succession in which the major part would be autotrophic, that means the producer, is called autotrophic succession, and the succession in which the major part would be heterotrophic or the consumer would be called as heterotrophic succession. Cyclic succession means started with some point, ended, there is a climax, and again it came back to the same place. If it goes in cycle, that would be called as cyclic succession. Now we will see the process of succession. So process is almost clear because we have seen the example by the image and we have already seen the process, but still just let's see the title what are there. So the first title is nudation. Nudation means there is a bare area. Bare area means where nothing can be grown, like any rocks and all. So first and all, there would be a nudation, then migration will take place. In migration, what will happen? The seeds and all will be brought from external forces or somehow to that bare place. After that, colonization will happen. What is colonization? Colonization simply means establishment of those plants and animals. If you have studied history and all, you might have heard about this term colonization. In colonization, what happened? If India was there, India was a country, Britishers came in and made their colonies in India, made their areas where they could live. Although India was already present, but they had their special places where they lived. So that were called as colonies. So similarly, there was a bare land when few seeds and all migrated and they made their own area to live or grow. That would be called as colonization in this case. Accession means the establishment of plants in new places called accession. Now till now the seeds came, now in this germination, growth and reproduction happened, so that phase is called as accession. Aggregation means the collection or accumulation. Competition, next phase is competition. So there would be not only one kind of plant present, several other species can come and start growing over there, so that will lead to competition. Invasion, again, see, these terms are very common and you understand by the terms only. Invasion means when some other species are coming without the requirement, then that would be called an invasion. For example, in agriculture, what happened? If you belong to some farmer family, or if you have seen how agriculture is done in farmer field, in farms, what happened? If you have planted wheat or rice, but apart from that some unwanted grass also grow on their own, so that kind of succession is called as invasion. Reaction, and when there is an invasion, there will be problems, so the unwanted plants would be taken out, that will be called as reaction. And stabilization, you know, everyone needs to be stable, so once the unwanted plants or whatever the succession is there, that would be removed, then the stabilization will take place. Okay, so this is also over. I hope you're getting my points, whatever I'm explaining today, and this is very important. So this subject is very important. From beginning itself, we will be trying to explain you each and every concept so that you understand and write the paper very well. Okay. So starting with new concept, that is ecotone. What is this ecotone? So if you see a diagram, it will be very much clear to you. Let me just bring up the diagram so it becomes easy for you to understand. So what do you see over here? We can see ecosystem. So this is one ecosystem, this is another ecosystem, and this is the area between the ecosystem. So the area adjoining two ecosystem is called as ecotone. By the diagram, definition might be clear. So what is ecosystem? I hope you remember what is ecosystem. Interaction of biotic and abiotic component in given area is called as ecosystem. So if this is a fixed area, this forest is a fixed area, and this lake habitat, water body, is a fixed area, and there is a certain area where there is neither solid surface, there is neither water body surface, that area would be called as marshland would be present over here, so that area would be called as ecotone. Okay, and there are special characteristics of ecotone. What are those characteristics? Let them get them one by one. So first characteristic of ecotone is that it may be very wide or it may be very narrow. What do you mean by wide and narrow? So if you see the image over here, width means if the width of this area, if this is one boundary, if this is the boundary of another ecosystem, if this width, it might be a huge width or it might be very narrow or it might be very small. So this is very first characteristic. Second characteristic of ecosystem is that it has the intermediate condition. Obviously the condition would be intermediate over here because it is adjoining or getting external temperature or pressure from both the areas. For example, in forest area, if the temperature is very low, and over here if temperature is very high, then the condition at this place would be intermediate, since it is getting the conditions from both the areas. Okay, and the organism which is present in this ecotone would be different from adjoining communities. Why they will be different? Because all the species coming from forest and our species coming from lake habitat might exist over here. That's why they will be different from the adjoining communities. And what happens, and it is not necessary that, sometimes it happens that the species which are living in these area are more than the species of lake habitat. For example, if any species which belong to lake, like frog, so there might be possibilities that more number of frogs go and live in ecotone area rather than living in lake. Okay, so this might be also a possibility. So these are the characteristics of ecotone. The next important terminology is ecoline. Ecolines means the imaginary line. It is not a clear boundary which is drawn. So over here an example of ocean is given. In ocean, what happens, as you go deep inside the ocean, the water body changes. For example, in the upper layer or the layer near the continent, the salinity could be less. As you move further, salinity might increase. Temperature, pressure, all condition will change as we move further or as we move beneath the sea. That means from the top to bottom, when you move vertically, the conditions might change, and the conditions might change in certain area. For example, it will be divided into certain area. For example, if you go 5 meter deep, there would be the properties or characteristic of the water might change, and if you go further 5 meter, it again might change. So you can see there is a imaginary line which is dividing these two segments into different part, and that imaginary line is called as ecoline. Okay, so this is clear, very much clear. Next is niche. So people get confused with the pronunciation of this word. Don't get confused. There are two pronunciation of this word, niche. This is British pronunciation, whereas in American pronunciation we call it niche. Okay, so whatever you can call, don't call it niche or like that. It's niche or niche. So what is niche? Niche or niche, you might have heard, there is a specific species or a particular segment are there in niche. So some people might ask you, what is your niche if you are doing something? So what is your specialty? So over here it refers to unique functional role and position of a species in its habitat or ecosystem. So in habitat or ecosystem, n number of people might be doing. So if we derive a certain species, so everything related to that species would be called niche of that species. Okay, so there are certain types of species niche, like habitat niche, where people live or where any organism live. Food niche. So see how these are divided. If we are considering frog as an organism, or fish, if we take example of fish, so they will have certain area where they will live. So it will be niche, habitat niche of all the fishes. There will be certain area or certain things that these fish will consume. So that will be food niche of these fishes. And reproductive, so they will breed with their own species. That will be called as a reproductive niche. And the physical and chemical temperature niche, so these will be common temperature, landscape, land slope, humidities. These would be the physical and chemical niche. So I hope you're understanding what exactly we mean by niche. Okay. So now terminologies are almost over. Now we will see the functioning of ecosystem, how ecosystem functions. So these functioning of ecosystem is not static, as we have already seen that environment or ecosystem, they are not itself static, they are dynamic in nature. That means there is interrelationship between, or there is interaction between the species, and there is always movement of energy from one area to another area. So that's why how it is defined, it can be studied under three heads. The functioning of ecosystem can be studied under three heads. We have seen what is ecosystem. Interaction of biotic and abiotic components in certain area is called ecosystem, and how these function and how do interact, they are studied under three segments. Those are energy flow, nutrient cycle, or they are also known as biogeochemical cycle. Other is ecological succession or ecosystem development. Fine, we'll start with energy flow. So in energy flow, you just have to remember few points, like energy always flow in single direction, that is they are unidirectional. If it is flowing in right direction, it will go in right direction. Actually it's not direction like north, south, east or west. It's not like that. Direction means over here we have got certain trophics level. There are certain more terms which you need to know. Once you understand, then you will be able to understand how, in what way it is unidirectional. Okay, we'll see that further. Just now you just know that energy flow is unidirectional. That means it will flow in only one directional. It will not get back. Okay. And what else? Energy flow through the trophic levels from producer to subsequent trophic level. Now let me tell you trophic level, or else you won't be understand further whatever I will tell you. So trophic just means a combination of certain species. For example, we have already seen that there are producers or autotrophs, there are consumers or heterotrophs, and there are decomposers. So these producers, for example, there are certain producers. If there is a plant, so they can be, all plants can be considered at one trophic level. So they are at one trophic level. The next stage would be of consumer. So all the consumer might be belong to the other trophic level. Now in these consumer, they can be subclassified. Even under this plant, the trophic level can be classified as few plants produces more energy as compared to other plants. So it is just a level which is given as per the movement of energy. So a single kind of species would be present in one level. Now if in consumer there are carnivores, herbivores, omnivores. So you can take example, the omnivores at one level, carnivores at another level, herbivores at another level. So these levels would be called as trophic levels. Fine, I hope now you've got that point. Now what are there else? And there is loss of energy in form of unstable heat at each trophic level. So whenever energy will flow, there would be obviously loss. So this is very common thing. You should know by common sense only, not need to be told. whenever there is transfer of energy in any form, either in biologically or physically, there is always some losses or the other, there would be there. So in this case also there would be some kind of loss. Now the trophic level interaction involves in three components. What are these three components or three concepts? You can say food chain, food web and ecological pyramids. We'll see them individually what they are. So starting with food chain, what do you mean by understand food chain? So you know the meaning of food and chain. If you just split these two words, you'll get the point what it means to say. So as we know, there are certain consumer and there are certain producers. So the food chain happens in certain way. For example, if we take example of grazing food chain, you'll just understand by example. In grazing food chain, what happened? I'll show you the diagram. That would be more easy for you to understand. If it is there, oh sorry, it's not there. So what happened in food chain? If there is plants or grasses are there. These are lots of grasses. Now these grasses produce energy, or you can say they make their own food and produce some kind of energy, and these grass are eaten by herbivorous animals like cow, deer, buffaloes. These animals feed on these grasses, and when they feed on these grasses, why they feed? We eat food, or any organism consume food for producing or getting energy. So for that very purpose they will consume food from this level, and again they will be consumed by another carnivorous animal. For example, you can say like lion, tiger. These might feed on these animals like cows, deers and all. Now again, why they will feed? They will feed for purpose of getting energy, and from where they will get energy? They will get energy from these animals. So it goes on, and when these die, when these plant animals die, lion, tiger die, these are fed by decomposers. There are certain segment of organisms called decomposers. They will feed on them and produce some nutrients which are converted in soil and further used by these plants. So always there would be a cycle. Okay, and see, you can see it is forming a chain. Chain means continuation. You can see it is forming a chain. And what kind of chain is there? It is food, because this grasses is food of these herbivorous animals. Herbivorous animals are food of these carnivorous animals, and carnivorous animals are food of these decomposers. So that's why this is called as food chain. Okay. Next is grazing food chain. So grazing food chain, I have given you example of grazing food chain. What happens in grazing food chain? So in grazing food chains, there are predators. Predators are there. That means the animals which eat or are being eaten at every steps. So I've just taken example of grazing food chain only, that you have understood. Next is detritus food chain. Detritus means dead matter, dead organic matter. So what are dead organic matter? They can be plants, leaves, animals. So when it starts with these dead matter, in case of grazing food chain, it almost starts with the grasses or plants, but here it starts with dead matter. So if these dead matters, from whom they are consumed, we have already seen it was consumed by whom? Decomposers. So these decomposers consume these food, and in turn they produce some nutrients and all, and which further produce plants and plants, and these plants ultimately these shed their leaves, and again they are consumed by these decomposers. So again it is forming a chain which is called as detritus food chain. Okay, that's great, and I hope you are getting the points whatever I am telling you. Now coming to flow of energy in food chain, how the energy flows. So see, we don't have to read all these texts, you just need to understand 10% formula. If you understand this 10% formula, everything would be clear to you. How the energy was flowing, we have seen the energy used to flow in one direction. Okay, so you just need to remember. So in one direction means, for example, if you see in this diagram, at producer level, they got some energy, it got transferred into primary consumer, again it got transferred to secondary consumer, and it got to top consumer. So the 10% rule means, let me see if diagram is present. If it is present, you will understand easily. If it is not present, I'll try to explain. Okay, yeah, here exam diagram is here. Fine. So at producer level, what happens? If for example, we are just considering example, they are producing 10,000 kilocalorie of energy. Fine. Now when these rats and all feed on this producer, they will absorb only 10%. Whatever the 10% of this energy would be absorbed by this, and remaining would be dissipated or lost in some or the other form. Okay. Again, when these snake or the secondary consumer feed on this rat, the 10% of this energy of this rat would be consumed by this layer, whereas the other energy would be dissipated or lost. Again, the last consumer, when it will consume this snake, only the 10% of this energy would be consumed by the last or the upper level. Remaining energy would be lost. So this is the 10% formula which you need to know, and by this it is clear, shorter the series or the shorter the food web or food chain, more the energy at the topper level. As long as it keeps on increasing, the amount of energy will keep reducing on the topper level. Okay, so this was all about the transfer of energy, and if you understand this, you can easily understand what is flow of energy, of food energy in food chain. Fine. Next is food web. So food web is nothing combination of several food chains. See what's happen, all the organisms which are present on earth, they don't consume food from one place. See, you can take your own example. Do you consume energy from, or do you consume food from one place? Sometime you eat at your home, sometime you eat at restaurant, sometime you eat at your friend place. So you have got several sources of eating food, or else sometime you eat vegetables, sometime you eat animals. So see, you are jumping from one place to another place. So we can't manage everything in one food chain. In food chain, what happened, there was one layer, it transferred energy to other layer, there was another layer, so it keeps on moving in this way. But here, since we are dependent on many other components, similarly animals too have the same phenomenon. So because of that, many food chains are joined together and they are called food web. What we understand by food web? Spiders make web. You know how spiders make web, something like this. So over here there would be several food chains which are joined together, hence they will be called as food web. Fine. Next is composition of food web. So food web will again consist of all the trophic level of animals, which we have already seen. So see, now everything will keep repeating. If you have understood the concept of this, the flow of energy and this trophic level, if you have understood this, you can understand every other concept. It will keep repeating, only just the terms will change. How it will be keep repeating and concept will be just change, you'll see when we discuss further. So composition, we'll see composition in food web. In food web, what is written over here? Food web operates according to food preferences of the organism at each trophic level. The availability of food source and other compulsions are equally important. In Sundarbans, the tiger ate fish and crab in absence of natural prey. See how it is important. What we know, that tigers and lion feeds on deers, like the animals which move on land. Generally they hunt these kind of animals, but when these animals are absent or when they are not present, they feed on fish or crabs instead of these animals. So see, we can see the dependency of one animal not in their natural form of food. They can feed in other food also when it is not present. Because of that, these food web are made. Fine. Next is ecological pyramid. Pyramid, what do you understand by pyramid? So there are many movies like Mummy, The Mummy Return. In those movies you have seen pyramid. Pyramid is a triangular structure, something like that, under which all the mummies were buried. Okay, so these are in shape of the triangle. That's why they are termed as ecological pyramid. As you can see, or you have seen in image also, in this case, see, this is in shape of pyramid. You can see over here in triangular shape. And why it is in pyramid? Because the number keeps on decreasing as we move further. For example, at producer level, there has to be many plants and animals, and they produce lots amount of energy, and when they are fed, as we have seen the 10% flow of energy, if you have understood this concept, you will understand this very well. If we keep on moving further, the amount of energy reduces. That's why the shape keeps reducing, and even the number of species required for producing the amount of energy keeps on decreasing, as there are many plants. See, for example, there is grasses grown on 1 acre of land. It can't feed 100 of animals. It can feed only fixed number of animals. So that's why, and whenever, for example, at primary consumer, there are 100 buffaloes. They feed on grass of 1 acre land. Now these 100 buffaloes can't be food for 100 other animals, that is at secondary consumer. They will be food of lesser animals or lesser numbers. So just understand, imagine what I'm trying to tell you. Don't go with the example, just try to understand what I'm telling you. Okay, so it is in shape of triangle, that's why it is called as pyramid. Where we were in ecological pyramid, I've already told, and pyramid of energy. So I have already explained what do you mean by this energy flow, 10% energy, and how it flows and in what form it flows. It flows in one direction, and yes, keep in mind, energy always flow in one direction. This has to be remembered every time. The direction has to be remembered, or else there would be trouble. And this 10% flow of energy, this concept also has to be remembered. Fine. And again, there are several trophic levels. So this one level, this would be called as one trophic level, this would be called as other trophic level, and so on. It keeps on increasing. Fine. Next is pyramid of number. Again, pyramid of number. In numbers, what will be considered? The number of species would be considered. For example, at producer level, we have lakhs of plants and grasses. At this level we have thousands, at this level we have hundreds, at this level we have in multiple of 10. So this would be called as number pyramid. This number pyramid are generally in two types, like inverted and in general term. So in general term, what will how it will be? So there would, as we saw, there are several kind of food web or food chain. We saw the several kind of food chain like grazing food chain and detritus food chain. So in this case, in food chains, we can say in grazing food, we can see grass producer, herbivorous, carnivorous, top carnivorous. So since this number is decreasing, that's why it is normally called pyramid, food pyramid or energy pyramid, number pyramid. Now over here, when it keeps on increasing, in some case it increases, in that case it would be called as pyramid of inverted number. So what could be the case? So in this case, the food web, we have seen there are several food chain, and food web are combination of several food chain, sorry. So here in this case, there are parasites which are consumed by trees for producing their food. These trees are fed by many birds. See, many birds sit on one tree and get their food, and again these birds are consumed by many lice and bug, the parasites, after their death, and again these parasites are consumed by hyperparasites. So the number keeps on increasing. That's why it is known as inverted number pyramid. Fine. Next is pyramid of biomass. What are these biomass? So biomass are nothing. When number increases of any biotic component, they are called as biomass. So pyramid biomass is usually determined by collection of organisms occupying each trophic level separately at measuring their dry weight. So again, it is similar to the number only. We have seen the number pyramid. So over here also it would be the similar case of number only, but it will count only one species at one level. So this is the pyramid of biomass. What else topics are? So again, see, as I said, the concept would be same, only names would be changed. So over here also you can see grasses, rabbit, snakes, birds, it keeps on increasing, and over here it keeps on decreasing. So it is called as inverted biomass. What is inverted biomass pyramid? Bioaccumulation. See, bioaccumulation, again this bioaccumulation is an important concept which you need to know. I'll explain you very quickly, and after that I think this is the last topic of the day. So biomass is accumulation of persistent and toxic substance or chemical in an organism. So in any organism, when there is accumulation, means collection of all toxic substances, at that time it will be called as bioaccumulation. When it happens when organism does not get metabolized or digested at equivalent rate of absorption. So for example, if someone is consuming a lot of toxic substance, but the ejections means the secretion of waste material is not equivalent to consumption, in that process bioaccumulation will happen. For example, in humans, we consume crops. These crops are grown using all kind of pesticides and insecticides. With the help of this pesticide, all kind of these chemicals get into the food. All fertilizers are used for production of growth of these plants. These chemicals which they get into the food, in whatever we consume, they indirectly accumulate in a body. When we continuously keep on consuming these food, there is accumulation of toxic material in our own body. Sometimes we have even seen some detoxification is required for body to proper function, because sometimes we don't have proper metabolism. Because of that, the toxic, or you can say, accumulation happens. So this is called as bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation simply means the accumulation of biotic components in some organism. Okay. Now example, what are examples? There are several examples given, like accumulation of mercury used in industrial process. So of stiffening on the hearts and brain cell of human. So whenever in industrial process, these lots of mercury are used, so people who are working in these sectors get accumulation with these mercury. So it is very dangerous to work in any factory over where mercury production or mercury used in huge number. And there are many examples. There is example of magnification or biomagnification also. What is this biomagnification? The gradual increase in concentration of chemical and toxic substances accumulation in the tissue of an organism at successively higher trophic level of food chain. So as we have seen in food chain, what happened at a certain level, there is some organism present. Next level, these are organisms feed on these organisms. Next level, again these feed on these. So continuously the accumulation of toxic substances keep on increasing. That is called as biomagnification. Process is very simple. So as I've explained about the consumption of pesticides or chemicals from the pesticide and insecticide which are present in crops, so it is just the same as the process given over here. There are certain examples given which you can read on your own. So I hope this is clear. Everything and every concept of this video is very much clear, and if you've got any issues regarding any concept of this subject, you should always ask in the comment box, or you should try to read somewhere so that you get clear This is very important subject. Many questions arise from this subject, so you should read this subject very carefully. So in this subject, let us quickly see what we have seen. We'll just see the titles, what we have discussed, and after that I'll wind up the video. So in this video, let me just go to the beginning just a minute. Okay, in this video we have studied about the environment. What is the environment? We have studied about the ecology, ecosystem. We have seen the definition, types of ecosystem, biosphere, ecology, types of ecology, and ecosystem, component of ecosystem, abiotic, biotic components, what are they, ecological succession. This was also very important concept. So we have studied all these things, and that is all for today's video. And again, if you have any queries, please ask so that you understand the topic. Okay, thank you for watching. See you next video. Till then, goodbye.